We're now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to wrap up with the last segment. A pretty popular segment just throughout the whole offseason. The Atlanta Falcons and the Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix sort of saga. Kirk Cousins being brought in for a lot of money. Then you draft Michael Penix with the 8th overall pick. Left a lot of people confused. Why wouldn't you instead draft a player that would add to Kirk Cousins and all that he could do for the Atlanta Falcons? But the Atlanta Falcons' new head coach, Raheem Morris, is pretty adamant about their decision to do it. The whole organization seems to be on the same page with Michael Penix and just reassuring that long-term success at the quarterback position. But Michael Penix has already talked about the situation and how his relationship is with Kirk Cousins, but now we finally have Kirk Cousins. What has he thought about the whole situation between the Atlanta Falcons, him and Michael Penix? On a recent episode of Bustin' with the Boys, they had Kirk Cousins on there, and they basically asked them, is there any beef between you and Michael Penix as of right now? Is there any awkward feelings right now? How is the waters right now in that whole relationship with him and the first round pick for the Atlanta Falcons? To which Kirk Cousins said, no, I don't think there can be. I don't think it's helpful. We're trying to win a Super Bowl and it's hard enough. So let's all be on the same page and let's go try to win the Super Bowl. Michael Penix basically said the same thing when they asked him about it at rookie minicamp, saying that he is just focused on going out there and performing, and that way he could maybe see some action if he just does his job and just performs as he should. Didn't really address any sort of awkward feelings with Kirk Cousins. According to Sports Illustrated, how this whole situation played out, one of the biggest reasons why Kirk Cousins left Minnesota was because they were pretty upfront with him and they mentioned them looking at drafting essentially his replacement, his successor in the draft. And it is just ironic that he signs with Atlanta and they do pretty much the same thing. How funny that all worked out in a sarcastic sort of way. But on that topic, on the idea of Kirk Cousins maybe knowing about what the Atlanta Falcons were planning, and would that have changed his sort of mentality around signing with the Falcons? Would he have considered some other spot if he knew the Falcons were planning on drafting Michael Penix in the first place? To which Kirk Cousins also said, I don't really deal in the hypotheticals. It just doesn't do us any good. And again, just basically keeping it pretty positive, saying that he wouldn't even think about that. But I think not saying anything about it says all that you need to know about it. I think there's no way anybody would have considered signing for the Falcons if they knew that they were planning on drafting a quarterback anyway. Now, the biggest caveat, obviously, is Kirk Cousins getting paid very, very well. So, if you paid me that much money, I would sit on the bench right away and give the starting job to Michael Penix probably. If we're being really honest, the amount of money that Kirk Cousins got is crazy. To just sit on the bench, who has it better than that? Honestly, just talking about the money that he got. So, but he does feel that he just has something to prove, and I think this was a great opportunity to do that, which is why I was so confused and so I wouldn't say against drafting Michael Penix, but I was a big fan of him. I thought he could right away step in to lead a team, but he was prevented that opportunity because of who drafted him. He can't do anything about it. He's in the NFL. He accomplished his dream, but I just feel like we're being robbed of an opportunity to see Michael Penix right away if Kirk Cousins, as everybody expects, goes in there, has the success that they had because they signed him to so much money. You don't give that much money to someone you don't think can right away contribute to all the weapons they obviously have. So in saying that, Kirk Cousins also went into that interview talking of other points of emphasis around this whole situation and describing his mentality with the Atlanta Falcons drafting another quarterback. He basically went on to say that you can only control what you can control. You can't really worry about anything else, even your own organization, what they're planning on doing. This is the NFL, is what he said. Basically, anything can happen, and having that mindset would prepare him for something like this. He has the right attitude about it. It always seems like he's trying to prove himself, and I think that's the right mentality to have when you're faced with a situation like this. But the biggest point for me with what makes this all different, and ironically also for Kirk Cousins, this has happened before. He mentioned on Bussin' with the Boys that 3 years ago, his old offensive coordinator with the Minnesota Vikings, Clint Kubiak, called and told them that they were planning to draft his successor back then. So, not foreign waters for Kirk Cousins in this situation. But my biggest thing with this, on top of feeling a certain type of way about not seeing Michael Penix right away be a starter, is that he got the warning before. The Vikings told him 3 years ago, and they told him this offseason, hey, we're planning on drafting a quarterback. So because of that, Kirk Cousins decides to not resign, decides to, 3 years ago, play even better than he did. The Vikings didn't draft anybody 3 years ago, but they at least gave him that warning. Every source that came out, every report that came out around the situation said that Kirk Cousins was pretty surprised and that there was no mention of this prior to draft night. So that's the difference there, not having that communication. How does that start off a relationship between a quarterback trying to do everything he can for this organization, but them not having, I don't know, just the etiquette to let him know, hey, maybe we're thinking about drafting this guy at number 8. To blindside him like this, I think would be pretty, would make me feel pretty just upset about it. But Kirk Cousins took it very professionally and is just looking past it, trying to go out there and prove himself again. And how also I think it is important how Raheem Morris, a new head coach, also sort of maneuvers this situation with their quarterbacks, how important the quarterback position is, and how a new head coach, young head coach, handles that will be a massive pivot point on how this season really rolls out for the Atlanta Falcons. How early he brings in Michael Penix, how he maneuvers that whole situation, trying to adjust to a rookie coming in there and leading this already young team. If you go to Michael Penix, there's no way you can go back to Kirk Cousins. So you have to have that mindset in there, because if you bring in Michael Penix, then he doesn't play as well as you thought, and you take him out again, not only are you in this quarterback carousel within your own team, but you sort of really harm that confidence for a young player by pulling him if he's not playing as well as he should. So all that mixed into this whole situation that the Falcons got themselves into, now they really have to tread pretty carefully around the whole quarterback situation. I'm sure they want to hold off on deciding if they want to bring in Michael Penix or not. Ideally, that's how all of this plays out, but how, once you make that change and how they prepared for it, how they roll out this entire season and how successful that they are, will be a massive sign and big telling point on how they managed this with Raheem Morris, with how Kirk Cousins handles maybe being benched this season if he's not playing well because of the injury, and how Michael Penix does as well once he comes in. But Kirk Cousins seems pretty even-keeled about it. Same with Michael Penix. They're all going out there trying to prove themselves on the field. I think that's all they can do right now, but it is just you can't help but think it's not an awkward situation. I can't imagine what the tension is in that room, how the relationship is in that room with that. But, that will all play itself out the rest of the offseason. I'm sure they're a candidate for Hard Knocks. That would be very interesting to see. But for right now, for the Falcons and myself, that'll do it all for this episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. I want to thank you guys for tuning into this episode, and to please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following us on all the other social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok for more of the network's content. If you want to see more of me and this show, check out the GSMC Sports Network channel and the GSMC Podcast Network channel on YouTube for YouTube Shorts that are posted every day. The whole recorded live shows are all on there as well, and individual segment videos. If you don't have time to watch an entire show, you can tune in to one specific segment video that is also on both channels as well. As a reminder, make sure to tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more football conversations and NFL topics with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys and also reminding you guys before I sign off, the official NFL entire schedule release is in just about half an hour, so make sure to tune into that. But also, again, thank you guys for tuning in, and I expect to see you guys all back here again with me tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go.